Welcome to my biggest Dexter video to date, my review of the series as a whole. Obviously from my channel, I'm sure you've seen I have a couple of other Dexter videos made. While I'm not a Dexter focused channel, I appreciate everyone from the Dexter community who has been supporting these videos. It means a lot and I owe a lot to this show for getting me started on YouTube. Enough of that, however. As I mentioned, today we will be doing a fully fledged review and look back on Dexter as a whole, a show that I started my channel with, and perhaps the next part of my content journey. I have a few things I tend to look at when I'm writing a review for a TV show. And those things tend to be the writing above all else, the acting, did the series dip in quality, or in the cases of some, only get better as it continued? The plot, was it interesting? Did the story flow well? My favorite part of any media, the characters. We'll be looking at each of these sections individually today, and as usual, end the review off with my overall thoughts. So the acting in Dexter is, in my opinion, really decent. The show is an unbelievably talented cast that give it their all, and really do put on some incredible performances. Michael C. Hall in the leading role playing Dexter Morgan is great, and he's able to portray this psychotic killer, while at the same time being able to show glimpses of good and take a truly deplorable character and make him lovable. I've seen him talk about how he got into character for the role and how he took method acting to a whole new level when he spoke on a talk show about following people around trying to remain unnoticed to get that part of the character down. While it is a little strange, it goes to show his commitment to making the performance just those few notches better. Very rarely in this show do we see a one-trick pony performer. The actress who plays Deb is a perfect example of this. Initially, I wasn't too impressed, but as the series progressed, Jennifer Carpenter really showed her range in the last few seasons. She can play the comic relief, she's believable as a commanding force when she gets promoted, and when she finds out Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher at the end of season 6 going into season 7, that's honestly one of her best scenes in the entire series, right alongside when she shoots La Guerta. It's safe to say in the series 90% of the time the performances are solid. I'm no expert of course, but the only character I think that was acted poorly was Zach. It just seemed a bit too much with the facial expressions and the way he would act, but on the other hand he was meant to be a bit of a goofball. Colin Hanks as well gets a bad rap because of how he portrayed the Doomsday Killer, but honestly I didn't mind him too much. However, I did really check out for most of season 6, but honestly he seemed to play the part of a crazy religious sociopath relatively well. I could give him a bit of flack for how sudden the change was from the more innocent guy who was seemingly forced into it, into the more mean and evil look he goes for later on. But honestly, that could be more of a writing issue than a performance issue. Yvonne Strahovski also gets a decent amount of bad attention for her role as Hannah, and the most I can say about her looking back on it is she didn't seem to give too much emotion, period. I'm sure both of them are wonderful actors and actresses in their own respect, but in a show full of great performances, those two really did stand out as the weaker of the bunch. So overall, the acting was pretty solid all around. So here's the thing when it comes to the writing of Dexter. It has some really high highs and some really low lows. It varies heavily between seasons, but I believe the writing was at its best for the first 4 seasons. That's when the storylines, the plot twists, and the overall tension of the story was at its absolute highest. The writing was great, we had villains that were complex and thought through, alongside fresh and interesting storylines that felt unique to each other. Each season was a new main idea they were going for. In season 1, they wrote a great character that was the reflection of what Dexter could have been had he not been given the code, which got slightly ruined by a horrible season later on. In season 2, we take a step back and have to look at our main character as the main villain. And the way Dexter sets Dokes up and slowly but surely pulls off a tremendous frame job was done really well. And we got a really satisfying ending, all things considered, to that season. And even if Lila at points did feel like she was just there to create tension in Dexter's life that made certain plot lines much more convenient for the writers, she was also a complete character and a well-written character that had multiple dimensions and wasn't just a caricature of a crazed lover. And seeing the finale of a rivalry that brewed throughout 2 full seasons between Dexter and Dokes was great. They had some great conversations and we could see both of their personalities at work, where at certain points throughout the season we see Dexter lying through his teeth and Dokes being incredibly honest about his intentions. And once the cards are on the table, Dexter becomes the honest one and Dokes tries to manipulate and convince Dexter to do what he says. It's great, and it's a testament to how good the writing team was for those first 2 seasons, and it continued for the following 2 as well. In season 3, Miguel Prado was introduced and he was a great character, a master manipulator who really makes you truly despise him, as well as them finally introducing the idea of a teammate of sorts for Dexter, a friend, someone he isn't fucking or killing that knows his secret, and trying to bear the weight of that and the consequences it could bring. While season 3 is my least favorite of the first 4, its quality can't be denied and it stands the test of time with this show. And then we moved on to season 4, most people's favorite season and the one that introduced us to the best, most well-written villain in the series, a severely twisted and completely insane serial killer known as Trinity, or Arthur Mitchell, played by John Lithgow. Not only was his performance amazing, but he was such a well-written character. The way he was written was really fascinating because again, he's not one note. He's incredibly complex, and still after watching Dexter to the extent I have, it's still so interesting to see a character that was written to be this criminal mastermind that hasn't been caught in decades, but at the same time has this side of an abusive father and husband, while also having the mind of a child who hasn't gotten over his childhood. The writing team brought their A game with this character, and it's a shame none of the other antagonists that follow the 4th season could even come close to the quality of the Trinity Killer, which brings me to the point where the writing took a nosedive. Season 5 was good to me. I mentioned in my ranking video that I really liked this season primarily for Lumen. I felt like her and Dexter's dynamic was really solid, but everything else about this season isn't really much to write home about. Seeing Dexter deal with his grief provided us with a different part of his character, which was nice to see, but honestly this season was a solid, not great, not bad kind of season. There was an obvious dip from season 4 in almost every single category, but the writing didn't truly fall flat until the next season, season 6. It was just boring and stale and so boring. It had a great ending, but why have a storyline where Deb falls in love with her brother? This was just shit. The dialogue this season was also really bad. The dialogue in Dexter has always been a bit wonky, but it took it to a whole different level, and again, they made Deb fall in love with her brother. That's horrible writing, point blank period. It was just really stupid. Season 7 was a lot better. They had some really solid storylines and the main villain was really solid. They showed us a broader and much more intimidating element of the criminal world, the Ukrainian mob. It was a breath of fresh air and something new for the series, and it was done really well for the most part. Serko was a very charming character. He was written to be a revenge-gripped lover, and he was one of the smarter and more aggressive characters Dexter faced, as well as having some serious pull. I just wish the Brotherhood actually had a bit more presence. It could have been really interesting to see Dexter being actually hunted down by a whole crime syndicate instead of just a small group of people. A storyline like that would have been really cool. It would have been much more difficult to make work than I would have ever known. But then we arrive at the reason why Dexter is looked at as having the worst ending in TV history. The writing in season 8 was absolutely awful, and I'm not just saying that for the hell of it. Season 8 was a drag the entire time. I was able to breeze through the majority of the show. I hit a small speed bump with season 6, but season 8 took me a couple weeks to get through on its own because at every turn they just disappointed me. They added in new parts to Dexter's story that felt really cheap and convenient. The Vogel and brain surgeon stuff was just really meh. It truly did spit in the face at the backstory we had been led to believe since season 1, and it took up a large portion of this season that could have been spent doing something else. Literally anything else. I said in a previous video, but the writing felt like they were trying to recapture the magic of season 1, but just did it really lazily. And even the creators know it ended extremely poorly, which honestly really sucks because being the last season, it's the last thing people remember of a series, and this was really bad. Overall, the writing was reasonably good for the show. It's a shame that half of the series is looked at as just getting progressively worse, besides season 7, but I can't argue with it. Nothing matches those first 4. Now, even though I touched on it in the writing section of the video, I still want to talk a bit deeper about the story itself. I think the premise of the show is extremely interesting. A lab geek serial killer who hunts down bad guys for bad reasons, that's some great TV, and I think that it did a really good job at remaining interesting throughout. Despite its bumps and bruises, it felt like the majority of the characters were given satisfying conclusions, besides Deb. Horrible ending for one of our main characters, and just a horrible ending in general. I think to a certain extent it was fine to make Dexter leave his family because of his fear that he's going to corrupt his child. Did it make sense to leave him in the custody of a different serial killer? Maybe, maybe not. And if he was so worried about giving him the killer gene, he would have gotten it anyway, which he did. But whatever, going off track there, I think that Dexter had a good feel throughout. It was paced relatively well. Rarely did I feel like things were moving slow, especially in the first few seasons. Later on, they had so many problems that pacing was difficult to pick up on when you're so checked out already, but it always remained interesting. There was always something to enjoy deep into the shitty seasons. You could find something to keep you going. Whether it was Dexter doing his lab tech stuff, or just letting the dark passenger take the wheel, no matter what it was, there was always something to enjoy. And I feel like its story was compelling enough throughout to somewhat make up for the last season. And this brings us to characters, my personal favorite part of any show. I love examining characters and following their journeys throughout the series, and watching what makes them tick. And this story has no shortage of phenomenal characters. From Dexter himself to the unforgettable side characters and some mainstays who showed a ton of character growth, this show does show the evolution of these characters in a way that feels good. Dexter in specific gets most of the screen time, of course, and we're able to follow his journey from where he starts as the cold lizard-brained serial killer and see him progress into someone who realizes his own humanity and grows into a character who actually does care about people. And it's really interesting to watch. There are a bunch of moments throughout the series where we see the conflict within Dexter and how he keeps swaying back and forth between the old him and new him, until the end where it was all ruined by the writing team. But besides him, we see the same thing with other characters like Deb, LaGuerta, Trinity. With Deb, we see her reach her dreams and then fall apart completely. With LaGuerta, we see a character who strives for self-preservation and her career and see the tolls that it takes on her. And with a character like Trinity, we get to see him become more and more despicable. Each character is memorable in their own way, and it's something New Blood wasn't really able to accomplish. Overall, I think that Dexter is a really solid show, with good acting, pretty good writing besides some key failures, with a very interesting plot and story that's helped along by its great cast of characters. It's not perfect by any means, it has some really bad dialogue at times, and some writing that makes the show unbearable to watch on occasions, but it always remains just interesting enough to finish. It's carried heavily by the early seasons that get you invested, but I'd say even season 8 they had some shining moments which gave us that old Dexter feeling. I'd recommend anyone who hasn't seen the show to at least watch it all the way through once. You won't be disappointed if you go in there to enjoy the first 4 to 5 seasons and survive the last 3. I appreciate you if you've made it this far into the video. There are going to be a few changes to the channel, focused more on longer, more review focused videos, and I have one huge project I've been slowly working on for a while that's absolutely going to be the greatest video I've ever created. Thank you for watching, subscribe and stuff if it suits you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys next time.